Here's the thing, everyone. Don't panic. Don't be concerned. Everything's going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about, except as food banks face shortages and fresh produce rots, pandemic spurs calls for a sustainable supply chain. So, what's happening? So, U.S. food pantries have faced an unprecedented demand while billions of dollars in produce has gone to waste due to supply chain disruptions from the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Conditions that are renewing calls for reforms to make the nation's food system more localized, resilient, and sustainable. Coronavirus-related lockdowns and business closures this year have led to staggering levels of job loss, with the United States Department of Labor reporting Thursday that roughly 22 million have applied for unemployment insurance since mid-March. Those job and income losses have driven up the demand for assistance from U.S. food banks and soup kitchens. A recent survey of those food banks found that through April 1st, 98% saw an increase in demand, 59% had less inventory, 67% needed more volunteers, 95% had higher operational expenses, and 37% faced immediate critical funding shortfall. The Guardian reported Friday on conditions at over 20 food banks and pantries across 15 states, some of which have established drive-through distribution centers to comply with social distancing guidelines. And in fact, if you go on social media, on Twitter or on YouTube, you'll see numerous videos of cars in huge lines waiting to get something from these food pantries and from these other areas that are trying to help out people who basically have no money to get food for themselves at this point. Civics. Also, it's another important thing to bring up that right now, because of the demand, so many people are right now noticing that there is a lack of fresh produce, and because of this, we're seeing a lot of farmers basically have to throw away some of their perishable goods because they can't meet up with the demands, or either that there's not enough people attending local grocery stores because you have people who don't have the ability to consume like how they used to. So this is a very important issue. And again, about $5 billion worth of fresh fruits and vegetables have already gone to waste. And now you have a lot of farmers that are right now wondering, well, how are they going to make ends meet too? Because again, I think a lot of Americans don't realize where we get our food from. And sadly, because of this, there's such a demand now. We could be seeing a crisis in regards to seeing communities all across this country basically living off of maybe one meal a day or 2 meals a day. And this is disturbing for a country that once prided itself as being this bastion of liberty with so much money that it could apparently provide for everything. But one little virus just cracked this entire system. Guys, I want to get your thoughts on this.
So this is so build on what Kit said. There's a lot of things that have hit farmers simultaneously. First of all, a big one is that no one is really talking about is all the restaurants have shut down. That's a lot of where they send food to, and they actually get usually a nicer markup. It's a lot of restaurants because everyone's wanting to get fresh produce that's local. So a lot of restaurants have had these contracts set up with these farms that they will directly get the produce from the farm directly to the restaurant. That way, it's slower supply chain. That's because of recent food trends that have happened over the last 5 or so years in restaurants. So that's all gone, and so then you have a huge amount of inventory that you now have. Of course, people eating habits have also changed. So everyone's now getting canned food. Toilet paper is now gold, and bottled water and things. So there's just people aren't buying fresh produce as much. People don't want to touch fresh produce as much, which also causes less people to buy it. So you have an enormous increase of supply, or actually not an increase of supply, a maintenance of supply, but just every part of the demand has gone down. So one thing that has happened recently is farmers that have dairy cows have been dumping their milk. Now, the last time I remember that being a thing that was a big deal was during the Great Depression, when there are literally pictures of dairy farmers dumping their milk in the street because basically these exact reasons, that there just isn't enough supply. They have this amount of cows that they still have to feed, they still have to maintain, they still have to operate machinery for, but they've built themselves for X number of gallons a week, and they're now only able to sell a quarter of it at the prices that they do. And they lower the prices too much, well, then they lose money producing, so they can't do that either. So they're just screwed.
There's something else too, because I used to work in a kitchen, and I also used to work at Costco too. And the two things that I really hated, or the one thing I hate about both those jobs, is the food waste when we have to throw out, large amounts of produce or milk. or any other kind of food. And it's just like, I'm thinking, this is such a waste. Sooner or later, people could use this. Were Americans in 2012 and even throughout 2014 to 2019 that, could maybe use some fresh produce, bread, milk, anything. And I get that there's, expiration dates, but some of the food that we were throwing away was really good. It was still usable. It was still edible. And it's a living nightmare that we're seeing this right now. And now you're seeing, like, if you type on social media right now, if you go on Twitter or on YouTube, you'll see videos of cars in long lines going to these food pantries and food dispensaries just to pick up food. And this is what's happening in America right now. Remember, it wasn't so long ago that we prided ourselves at this country that could do anything. And now we could barely provide for our people, and our food supply chains, it's not holding up. The system cannot hold. What we have built was nothing but a lie. And this is why, again, I always say we have to get involved in this political system right now. We have to reform it, because right now, those that are currently manning it, those that are currently in control, have no idea what they're doing. And we are all left holding the bag, trying to figure out how we're going to provide for our friends and family.
It's interesting because you think about all that food that's gone to waste. There's a quote here that says we have hundreds of thousands of farmers sitting on product because they don't have the financial means to ship and distribute it throughout the country. There's good, nutritious food going to waste while there are thousands of people going hungry. That's just it's kind of mind blowing to think that here's all this food, we can't get it to the people who need it. Obviously this pandemic is, again, it's just such a domino effect on so much more than just, people getting infected and people getting sick. Again, we've said it many times, especially with the economy as it continues. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know. I'm just scared to see what this is going to look like a couple months down the road.
And really quick, here's a great piece of irony for everyone. The U.S. would always poke fun, make fun, show superiority to the USSR for distributing the food, even if it meant the people were malnourished. And here we are, unable to distribute an excess of food to starving people.
One final note, there is, I think it's important to bring up a solution. And this is something I learned. I think I encourage all of you to learn how to do too. And that is learn how to grow a garden, learn how to grow food. It took me quite some time to, successfully grow a strawberry patch or learn how to really grow good tomatoes. But I've done it, and it's a challenging task. But when you can actually grow your own food and actually learn what it takes to really maintain like a supply of food that you are growing yourself, it's a very rewarding experience. And I'm going to be doing that this summer. And hopefully I'll be able to, grow a nice, stock of strawberries and tomatoes and green beans. But this is something we have to be independent now, because the system can't take care of us. So there we go.
John, you want a final word?
Go ahead, John.
So when you talk about things like this, there's always this is one of the instances that people of libertarian leanings like to, throw in your face. Like, look, governments are it's the government that's keeping the people from being fed, things of that nature. Like they're not allowed to give out those bagels because the New York mayor said no more bagels for the poor. You're just incentivizing them to be poor and homeless and things like that. And, there's always the argument that, less government would be better in this situation. But there's also the argument that we could just fix the laws. We could just fix what's broken. Maybe don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would argue
that's where my mind's at. Like, okay, let's identify what's making these hangups happen and go ahead and fix that. Because I promise you, McDonald's wouldn't be having this problem if if there was a profit margin involved. McDonald's wouldn't be having this problem.
And just to build on that, to people that say that in this situation, the government has the minority of control over how supply chains work. In fact, you were talking before the show that McDonald's effectively has better supply chains than the U.S. So whenever I hear libertarians like make that sort of argument in this context, there's other contexts where I'll agree with it, but in this context, it's just a lazy argument. It's like, well, the government had some amount of influence somewhere in the supply chain, somewhere along the line, and therefore it's the government's fault 100% all the way through. Where in this case, it's, yeah, you have government rules that we don't agree with when it comes to expired food, but that's really with expired food that's in the supermarket that's past its expiration date. There isn't a law that says farmers and stores can't donate directly to food banks before the expiration date happens. The fact that they're waiting until the expiration date means it is because, as you said, their profit margin. So the fact that they're not profiting off that, and in fact, they would be worried, if supermarkets worried that if they give that food to a food pantry consistently, that they're undercutting their own profits.
Yeah. So I think we should end this on a humorous note. I'm not going to say it fully because we get flagged by YouTube, but PHUCU says this: I first learned to grow weed, then worry about food. LOL. So you know what? Hey, smart idea, but also learn how to grow food too, buddy.
You're going to need to know how to. You're going to have to do both at the same time. Is when you get that weed, you're going to want the food.
Oh, exactly. So dude, you gotta learn how to grow food. So there we go.